Hello, hello. Welcome back to the P2P Soap Box. I'm your host and P2P BFF, Marcie Maxwell. Today, we are diving into something that's reshaping the peer-to-peer landscape. Honestly, in ways we could have only dreamed of when our events began. What happens when the very success of your mission fundamentally changes how your community engages with fundraising? When life-saving treatments transform a terminal diagnosis into a chronic condition, everything shifts, including the psychology of giving and the motivations that drive your supporters. Today, I am joined by Robin Paterson, Senior Director of Special Events and Peer-to-Peer Campaigns at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. The CF Foundation is the world's leader in the search for a cure for cystic fibrosis, funding life-saving research, supporting people living with CF, and ensuring access to high-quality specialized care. Their Great Strides Walk has been a mainstay in the peer-to-peer top 30 ranking, coming in at number 20 in 2024. Robin is navigating a unique challenge. As medical breakthroughs have extended and improved lives for cystic fibrosis patients, their relationship with fundraising has evolved from urgent survival to long-term advocacy. For the first time, the foundation is engaging with thriving teens and adults with CF, a generation that wasn't expected to exist when many programs were first designed. From adapting messaging strategies when your cause story shifts from crisis to hope, to recruiting and coaching a new generation of fundraisers who see cystic fibrosis differently than their parents did, Robin is here to share practical insights for any organization whose mission success is changing their community dynamics. So let's jump right into my conversation with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation's Robin Paterson. Robin, welcome to the P2P Soap Box. So happy to have you join us.
So great to be with you, Marcie.
So tell us a little bit about your professional, your personal journey that's led you to your role at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
Sure. So I'm Robin Paterson. I am the Senior Director of Special Events and Peer-to-Peer Campaigns for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. But before joining CFF, I actually worked in the newspaper industry in marketing and promotions, managing their newspapers and education program. So for anyone that's not familiar with what that is, it means that I did a little bit of what I do today, just not in a nonprofit space. I partnered with local businesses to secure sponsorships, and I recruited schools to have newspapers in their classroom and then worked with the teachers to teach them how to use the papers in the classroom. So it was a lot of fun. Definitely a taste into what we would be getting into in the peer-to-peer space. And while I was working in the newspaper industry, I actually planned a promotional event for a new young professionals paper called Play that was being distributed out on the main line outside Philadelphia. And the event, we selected the CF Foundation to be the beneficiary. It was a battle of the bands, which used to be popular years ago. I know it's not really the thing anymore, but
You're dating us, Robin.
When I was younger, it was a lot of fun and everybody went to those. But through the planning of that event, I met members of the CF Foundation and that local chapter in Philadelphia, and also members of the community. And it just struck me. It's funny, but I remember meeting with them and just walking away going, I need to work there. I need to get involved. I really felt just so deeply moved by the mission, and met an individual with CF during that meeting who I am still friends with today. She's actually had double lung transplant and she's in her 50s. And not too long after that event, I joined the foundation as a development director and worked out of the Philadelphia office, working on multiple fundraising events, just like we all do, and working with so many wonderful families and volunteers. And I spent 9 years of my career with CFF in the chapter in various roles before moving into the national role with headquarters in Bethesda. And what's crazy is this year I'm celebrating 18 years with the foundation. And I'm now leading the Foundation's special events program, which includes peer-to-peer.
I love that. I always love hearing the different journeys that people take to get into the world of peer-to-peer. So you mentioned that you oversee the events and peer-to-peer portfolio. For somebody who maybe isn't as familiar with the CF Foundation, can you just give us a quick overview of the peer-to-peer portfolio and what your event space looks like?
Sure. So our peer-to-peer fundraising program began over 50 years ago with just a handful of community-led Great Strides walks, which some of you might know that name, Great Strides. They really offered a lot more than just fundraising for our community, where they created connection and belonging for those who were impacted by CF. Because CF can be a very isolating disease. And really, as our community and organization evolved, so did our peer-to-peer event portfolio. Since then, we've expanded our peer-to-peer portfolio to include CF Climb, CF Cycle for Life, Extreme Hike, Team CF, and most recently, Rose Up, which is a DIY event led by CF adults, and also Breathe Team, a national running program. But all in all, we host about 400 peer-to-peer events nationwide, and we are projecting to raise just over $31 million this year.
So I am going to have you tell everybody, because I love this story, how the name Rose Up, where that came from.
Yeah, Rose Up was honestly just an incredible event that rose up, no pun intended, but pun intended, right? During the pandemic, and really the height of the pandemic, where we had a group of 3 CF adults who came to us and said, we need to find a way to bring the community together, especially at a time when we can't be together. But for them, it also just meant beyond the pandemic, how do we help our adults rose up, right, and get to lead and show really to their families and friends that they are now in the fight and that they are part of this mission. And with that, Rose Up became an event. They really talked through what they want to look like and how it would function, and really leaned into meeting the community where they were, making it as inclusive as it could be, so people get to choose what they want to do, when they want to do it. And then we celebrate their efforts on Rose Up Day, which is this year, September 18th.
I've heard the rumor that the connection to Rose, though, is because somebody once thought that cystic fibrosis, that they were saying 65 roses.
Yes, that's actually where 65 roses came from years ago.
I love it. I love it. I can just imagine somebody talking about the fact that they have 65 roses instead of cystic fibrosis. So you mentioned, you talked about how cystic fibrosis patients typically can't be in the space together. You've talked about the adults. And in our kind of prep conversation, you talked about how, yes, the mission of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has remained the same, but the landscape is shifting really dramatically right now. So can you talk about how some of these advances in treatment and the fact that CF patients are living longer and healthier lives, how that has changed how your community is engaging with your peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns?
Sure. It's such a great question. And honestly, it's one of those things where you're really challenged to talk about it, but we're excited to talk about it because what a great thing to have to deal with, right? The fact that what we're doing is directly impacting the lives of those with CF in such a positive way. Now, it's really changed the way that our community engages with us, but also how we engage with them. Now, advances in treatment, especially modulator therapies, there are actually 4 out now that have extended the life expectancy and significantly improved the quality of life for many people living with CF. And in the past, many CF patients didn't live past their teenage years, but now, because of these advancements, they're living into their 50s and their 60s, and some are even living into their 70s and their 80s. Definitely a change. And in the earlier days, our events were fueled so much by urgency and that desperation feel because we didn't have these therapies that are making this positive impact on their lives today. And today, that urgency is really transformed into deep gratitude and strong determination to finish what we started. This fight was started years ago by a few families, and still today, it is driven by families. Now, the passion that they bring to the table every day to find a cure and really impact the lives of those living with CF. But because of these advancements also, many adults now live independently. They're pursuing careers, getting married, they're advocating for themselves and others. They're not having others advocate for them anymore, which is what it once was, even just 5-6 years ago, which is wild to think about. And at the same time, our newer families aren't feeling that same immediate urgency that they once did, years ago. That shift has really created some exciting new opportunities, but it's also created some challenges. The opportunities are in our DIY space. We're seeing DIY efforts pop up more and more. We're seeing increased participation from CF adults, right? Because they're living longer and healthier lives. They want to get more involved and they want to lead. And also growing interest in more flexible, personalized ways to get involved. But the challenges, the emotional drivers of participation have greatly changed. It's getting harder to retain people and even to keep people understanding the importance of fundraising. And while, our traditional campaigns like our walk program, Great Strides, it remains essential and it's still one of our main entry points to the foundation, we're seeing many people expand into other campaigns or even create their own through DIY. So our approach remains centered on meeting people where they are, but more than ever, we're focused on meeting people where they are. Really working to offer those meaningful, inclusive ways to engage with the mission, but also help them continue making an impact, looking for other ways to get involved.
So I think you're right. It's a great problem to have, right? But it is a challenge. And, how you impact how you train your staff to talk about things differently, how you use your messaging differently. So, what trends are you seeing and kind of how are you adapting your communication, your story, your message to engage people in terms of these new motivations and new connections to the cause?
So we're seeing a few trends, across the board, and some will tie directly into what I just shared. The first one being really what we just talked about, that main shift from fundraising out of desperation to fundraising out of gratitude is what we refer to it as, because it really has changed. That sense of urgency that once greatly impacted them to sign up year after year is just not the same. While it's still there for some, it's not there for others. And while we aren't losing people overall, the way they engage with us is definitely shifting. We're also seeing that, the rise of CF adults to become advocates, to become fundraisers, to be team leaders, right? That's also a big change for us and a trend that we're seeing across the board. There was a story this past year in Great Strides that I just love and sticks with me. But there was a man by the name of Justin who led a Great Strides team. And this was the first year that he actually started as the team leader. And it wasn't just Justin coming out and being the leader of the same team. It was Justin coming out and inviting his workplace. And he had over 100 people that he worked with sign up to be on his team, which was really amazing. And that might sound small and simple, but it's a big shift for us because those individuals, usually we were asking, will you come out and join us, right? Come to the walk. Now it's, will you come out and recruit your workplace, right? Can you bring your friends and family? Will you lead a team? It's a very different message that we have now than what we once did. And their stories and their leadership, right, are really driving participation beyond themselves now, which is really incredible. We're also seeing a demand for flexibility and personalization. As I mentioned, kind of that DIY space, which is so important. And while our traditional models are still there and they still are going to be important for years to come, there's definitely a growing interest in being able to choose your own way, right? And looking for ways to meet the community in this space is something that we are very focused on. Really leaning into that and figuring out what the best way is. And we have things like Rose Up, as I mentioned now. That is in addition to our existing what we call Passion Fundraising campaign, which is DIY. It's just a fancy name for it in the CF space.
I like Passion Fundraising because I hate the term DIY. So I love the idea of Passion Fundraising.
And then we also developed this past year what we call Run Your Way. So it's a part of our Breathe Team National Running Program. But if you want to participate in whatever race you want to in your own time, in your own way, it's not a part of one that we have set up. We're providing a way for you to do that. And we are continuing to look for ways to do a Run Your Way concept across the board so that we can meet our community exactly where they are. I also mentioned before that it's kind of harder than ever before to retain new families. Retention's always been difficult for us in the nonprofit space. We have to have strategy. We have to have stewardship, right? And a plan to really uphold that. But as treatment advances, reduce that visible burden of CF in some cases, that urgency may feel less immediate. And so we're working to really create more meaningful, relevant pathways for involvement that really do reflect today's CF experience. And we're developing better stewardship plans. It's something that we went back to the drawing board on and said, what are we not doing right? Because we're getting new families, and that's not been the hard part. It's keeping them that's been hard. So really paying more attention to what we're doing in that space and spending more time on it. And then last, I'd say, is really the Gen Z side of things. Like, we are definitely seeing a Gen Z movement and people really stepping up and voicing that they want to be more involved. No longer just wanting to be participants and sitting on the sidelines. Like, they want their voices to be heard. And they want to be part of the mission and really see how their efforts move it forward. But I'm excited for this group. I know this group, it brings some nerves, but I really do feel like they show some great progress. And our peer-to-peer national ambassadors this year are both in this age group. One is 15 and one is 19. And they are so inspiring. I can't say enough great things about them, but they are not afraid to speak up and ask for more to do. I think they've asked for more to do than any other ambassador we've ever had. And they are so eloquent when they do, which is the most shocking. You wouldn't think teenagers would be not only willing to speak up, but then speak so eloquently about CF and their experience and to get others involved. They're just very, very passionate. But I'm excited about that group and what's to come.
Well, I have so many thoughts, especially as we talk about Gen Z. And I think about one of the things that I've noticed is there is so much, I guess desire is the right word, to have an identifier or to be able to kind of like uniquely craft like who your identity is. And whether that is gender or sexuality, to be able to say, this is me, unique. This is how I'm unique in this world. And I think I can imagine being able to kind of put that flag in and say, I'm, living with cystic fibrosis, or I'm if they consider themselves a survivor, or kind of whatever term that they use, that this generation seems very ready to claim that label, that title, maybe in ways that other generations kept that side of them hidden, from, or that wasn't something they necessarily bragged about to the outside world.
Yeah, I would say that we're seeing a little bit of both in our community, those that are comfortable and those that are still not, right? And those that are still really trying to find their voice and their CF voice at that. And the stories are different. The stories in our younger audience are different than what they once were. It's been really amazing to watch as they are coming to the table and where are they joining us, the events that they're interested in, the events that they're not interested, right? Are they wanting to advocate? Sure. A lot of them want to advocate and get involved in that way. And then it's really figuring out, how do we make them great fundraisers? Because when they are in and they're invested, they are there to stay. And that's been the most amazing part about them, is that passion just grabs on and latches on in a great way.
I also think this generation, they've grown up. Obviously, we talk, they're digital natives. They've grown up with social media, but they've grown up in this, personal fundraising, crowd fundraising environment of you give to people to help. So it's a lot more understandable. They can wrap their head around what it takes to fundraise, I think, in a different way, again, than maybe, our fundraisers of the past that kind of had never done it before and didn't know what it looked like. So I think, I think that's something we're learning across this entire generation. So with this shift, though, I can imagine kind of switching from sense of urgency to a sense of gratitude, evolving who your audiences are, working with older leaders because people are living longer. It seems like internal alignment would be a major key. So how is this changing kind of how you're equipping your staff to recruit and coach these fundraisers differently, kind of as y'all are going into this new chapter?
It's funny. I mean, I feel like this is such a simple answer, but I can explain it a little bit more, but I feel like we're talking about it, and we're talking about it a lot. We are not shying away from the fact that our community has evolved and that we need to evolve with it. Not just as fundraisers, but as an organization, and how we respond to the way the community is engaging with us today. And I feel like we're doing it in numerous ways. Of course, we're hosting trainings. Of course, we're, hosting in-person learnings. Even we have a training coming up next month, even with our newer staff, to try and really bring them on board and help them understand these things right out of the gate. But we also are looking at it, with messaging, and also how we measure success moving forward is also something we talked about. Because I do feel like, while our Great Strides events remain that flagship, we've expanded that portfolio to be responsive to those needs, right? To include things like Breathe Team, the National Running Program, also Run Your Way, to include Rose Up, which is DIY. And we're continuing to look at DIY beyond Rose Up for how we continue to really elevate that part of our events and really meet the community where they are and help our staff think in those ways too. So they really are thinking about that, not just once in a while, but all the time. And really always also keeping moves management at the forefront, understanding that Great Strides might be the entry point, but it's a starting point. And that we want people to come in through Great Strides, but to move through our system, right? So that we can keep them for the long haul and really training to that more than we have before. Our messaging too has shifted, I wouldn't say a lot, but slightly. Our messaging has always been strong and it remains strong, but curing CF is now at the forefront. Because of the advancements in modulator therapy and also in research, a cure is in our future. And now it is working to get to that finish line so that we can keep, our space and research moving forward and the various therapies that we have right now in the pipeline moving forward so that we can one day all celebrate that we have found a cure for CF, which is really exciting because when I first started, we didn't talk about a cure. So big changes within the CF Foundation space in 18 years of time even. And I talked about looking at different ways to measure things because we're also looking at engagement as a possible metric. As things shift, we kind of have to also shift ourselves. Revenue, of course, is always going to be important and a driver for us. And our overall goal to raise $100 million as an org and fundraising still remains. But, we do need to look at things differently because we need to keep people with us. And so we are talking about engagement differently and really thinking through how do we measure engagement so that we can look at that as a success driver also, which is also just another way to look at things. And I'm excited for it because I think that engagement is going to be key to keeping people for the long haul.
Absolutely. I agree. So I have a question. If there are people that are listening and they're thinking, I feel like we're going through this same situation, like our community is evolving. Our, again, mission still stays the same, but we need to adjust how we're thinking about it. What advice would you have for somebody who's kind of just at that tipping point of change and they need to adapt?
Listen. I would be listening more than you ever have, not to be afraid to work with your volunteer leaders and really call on them to understand what's motivating them today. Where do they want to engage with us? What else are they looking for, right? What are those shifts that they're feeling too? To really understand better the ways that you can engage them more in your work. But listening has always been key for us and still remains that driver. We work so closely with our community and always have for many years. We even work very closely in the peer-to-peer space with our Peer-to-Peer Leadership Council, which is a group of volunteer leaders from across the country who meet regularly to give us insight and guidance and advice. And they work right alongside us to develop resources and tools for the community to use. I would heavily, heavily encourage anyone to lean into their community and listen, because that definitely is what's going to help you.
I feel like we could unpack the Peer-to-Peer Leadership Council in a whole nother conversation, Robin. Well, I think this is, again, it sounds like it is an exciting time at the CF Foundation, and they are really, I'll say, rising to the challenge. So if there are people that are wondering kind of where can I learn more about what the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation is doing, are they hiring? Can I get involved? Where should we send people?
So they can go to cff.org if they want to learn more about the overall organization and our work in the research space, get to understand how close we are to the cure, because it is very exciting. And to go to fundraise.cff.org if they want to learn more about our events portfolio. Because as I mentioned, we have a lot of peer-to-peer events and we have events even beyond peer-to-peer. And we would love for more to join us and to help us achieve our mission. And we also invite you to be a part of history because, as I said, we know a cure is in the future. Now we just got to get there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Robin. And for everybody listening, we'll see you on our next episode of the P2P Soap Box.
Thanks, Marcie. This was great. Thanks for inviting me.
The P2P Soap Box is produced in partnership with True Story FM, engineering by Pete Wright. Music this week is by Russo. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we hope you'll consider doing just that for our show. But the best thing that you can do to support the P2P Soap Box is simply to share the show with a friend or colleague. Thank you for listening.